Greg, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Looking forward to it. The role that we play in electrification, it's just not manufacturing cable or manufacturing accessories. It's providing services and solutions, not just in terms of products, but in technologies and importantly, the role that we can play in contributing to the climate. We've got a strong goal of being carbon neutral by 2050, but it's the actions that you take along that way. It's been a bit of a whirlwind the last few years.
Definitely not been a boring few years, has it, as an executive?
Absolutely not. We haven't seen any real innovation in the construction industry over the last 20, 30, 40 years. The construction industry is a significant contributor to waste to landfill. And whilst everyone wants to see action taken against that, it has its challenges, I won't lie.
Greg, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Looking forward to it.
Yeah. And I was just doing a bit of research beforehand. We're coming up to your 20-year anniversary with the company. Is that right?
It is in October. It's amazing. It seems to have gone fast. It doesn't feel like one of those careers that's been 20 years in the one place. It's been there's been a lot of change and continues to provide passion for me. So yeah, it's gone very fast.
Yeah. And what's obviously like in today's age, people change jobs quick. And
look, I think the world has changed significantly. I felt when I first went into this role and, you network a lot with long-term CEOs and they're just, they've got all the answers. They've seen it all. And I think come COVID, it was a bit of a leveler. We started to experience new challenges for business, the environment, and then as individuals and CEOs, you needed to be able to, change the way that you work. And I felt like I'd caught up. And I think the learnings, personally for me since then and the continual development and, COVID then has morphed into other challenges. So it's been a bit of a whirlwind the last few years, but gee, it's been an exciting role to have.
It's definitely not been a boring few years, has it, as an executive?
Absolutely not.
Especially as the CEO of a manufacturing business, I would suggest, of all the industries.
Yeah, it's been, look, at manufacturing's challenging in Australia, and we've seen a lot of manufacturing go offshore over the last 20 years. It started with automotive, but look, I'm really proud that we're able to still have a sustainable operation. The obvious challenges around labour costs and costs of energy and scale are there, but I think if you can find the right positioning for your business and try and find that right value proposition and how to leverage that, I think it's still very much sustainable. The challenges are all the inputs and the raw materials that have to come from offshore. So it's certainly got its challenges. And I mean, especially now with what we're seeing, I mean, a lot of our competitors come out of Asia, specifically China, and the recent geopolitical challenges with Trump and tariffs have seen intense competition. So I feel like we're about to go through another wave of challenges that we're going to have to overcome.
Yeah, completely. Have you found? I mean, you mentioned Trump there. Obviously, he's part of something bigger. This kind of wave of nationalism. Have you found that the kind of manufactured in Australia badge that you guys wear proudly, is that something that's helping your business at the moment?
Look, I like to think it is, and I think there's a place for local manufacturing, whether it's how quickly we can bring innovation to market, how we can reduce lead times, how we can add certain value to our clients. I think the frustrating part is that there's a lot of investment, especially government investment in infrastructure. And, the premise is to be able to invest in infrastructure and support local supply chain and local industry. And we haven't quite seen that play out yet. And I know there's been a lot of discussion recently, and this isn't certainly not a political discussion, but I think I'd like to see, the local industry supported and recognised more. But I think it's up to us. We need to make sure that we're as lower cost as we can be, that we're efficient and we're providing value that people are willing to pay for. So it's really, the onus is on us, but there are some challenges to make sure we can compete at that level.
Yeah, we've been fortunate enough to have a number of Australian CEOs on the podcast so far involved in manufacturing, and I've really been struck by the kind of determination to be innovative, to keep the manufacturing in Australia, to work together, to work with government. Yeah, it's been very encouraging, certainly for me to hear.
Yeah, look, it's I think it's important. I also I'm a member of a number of forums where there's other CEOs of local manufacturing businesses, and we know what our challenges are. But I think striving to be different and be able to have that differentiated value proposition is just so important. But you can't lose fact that you've got to be competitive. So we've got to be low cost. We've got to be staying ahead of our overseas competitors and offering something different. So the opportunity's there. Certainly for it to be sustainable, we just need to work really hard.
Yeah. You've seen so much change within the company. One of the things you and I spoke about when we had a brief discussion a few weeks ago was Nexans is very much in transition at the moment, moving away from being sort of a manufacturer to a solutions partner. Talk us through what that transition looks like and why you guys are doing that.
Yeah, look, I'm fortunate to be I'm leading a subsidiary business in Australia and New Zealand of part of a big global business, and our global CEO Christopher Guerin, he's got a very unique operating model, and it's around what we call E3, which are the three pillars around the economic drivers, environment, and engagement. And we look at and especially Chris, but we look at the world, and I look at it here locally, and we can't be everything to everyone. And we've decided that we want to be a pure player in electrification, and we've made those decisions to start to exit out of the markets that aren't core to electrification and really double down on those electrification markets. And for us, it's about bringing something that's real, and the vision that we have for our business about the role that we play in electrification. It's just not manufacturing cable or manufacturing accessories. It's providing services and solutions, not just in terms of products, but in technologies, and importantly, the role that we can play in contributing to the climate. And we've got a strong goal of being carbon neutral by 2050, but it's the actions that you take along that way. And we're all invested, and I think that resonates with our employees as well. But I think just being everything to everyone, there's such capacity in our neighbouring countries, China, India. They're lower cost. They've got advantages in certain areas that we need to be very specific, and we've got to be about value and what value can we bring to the verticals that we want to operate in.
Yeah,
and I see that as really exciting, and it gives us some real focus going forward.
Why electrification? This is probably reasonably obvious question and answer, but
yeah, look, I think electrification is where Nexans has come from the pioneers of electrification. But if we look at what the outlook is and the transition that the countries are going through, connecting continents but using renewable sources to be able to drive industry, we feel that there's a really strong role to play, and there's no doubt that they're the markets that I think are going to be absolutely fundamental for us. We look at, the source of electricity and whether that moving away from fossil fuel to more renewable sources, especially in this part of the world, how that energy is then distributed and transmitted across the country, and then the verticals that we all operate in. And, we're seeing the big onset of technology now and the growth in data centers. There's a real risk in construction these days of fire, so making sure that we're using sustainable solutions to prevent fire, but still to be able to enable the amount of data that needs to be used. Other challenges, which are real. I mean, the housing crisis and the shortage of homes and the number of homes that have to be built. The resources that we have to be able to build them, there's shortages, there's skill shortages, and trying to contribute with solutions that will help, reduce the cost to build, reduce the time to build, but still allow, people to be able to have their own home is it's very important.
What have been some of the biggest challenges you've faced in your role in terms of implementing this transition into the Australia, New Zealand part of the business?
Yeah, thanks. There's been a number. I mean, I look at, Europe, and they're a lot more advanced in terms of where they sit with the whole climate and the transition to low carbon material. And in Australia here, it's nice to have, and there's a willingness to use, but I don't think there's quite a willingness to pay. So the pace that we're able to transition versus what the market's willing to accept has been, something that we've got to be a bit patient. I think also innovation in the construction industry, we haven't seen any real great innovation over the last 20, 30, 40 years. And I think it's the hesitancy to adopt innovation, and that comes from, rigid procurement processes down to, skepticism. And I just think that, you just have to be able to keep plugging away at those sorts of things. Obviously, high labour costs. The other piece is around, our strategy is certainly around sustainability in the environment. And again, if we look at our industry, the construction industry is a significant contributor to waste to landfill. And whilst everyone wants to see action taken against that, the solutions that have been there have been costly, and there's been a real reluctance to want to pay. So I think we're in any transformation where we're trying to fight against, norms and we're ingrained behaviours, and it just takes time to be able to break through those.
Yeah, that's tricky because, like you say, the kind of global strategies coming from sort of the European HQ, markets are different. How are you managing that as kind of the person in the middle in terms of sort of implementing that overall plan into the local market? There's an education piece. What's that like, kind of being the man in the middle?
Yeah, it has its challenges. I won't lie. It's you just need to be relentless, and we need to change mindsets, not only of our stakeholders and those in the market, but also of our own people, and having that belief that the strategy is sound. It works, and we just need to keep on trying. And I think there's a number of ways to be able to execute. And if the first one doesn't work, you have to be relentless and keep trying. But yeah, it is. It can be tiring. I mean, there's always that the risk that the business can take one step forward and then can slip two steps back. And trying to keep on top of that and keep the the vision at the forefront of what drives us is super important.
And what are some of the early wins or kind of little proof points you've been able to use to help you with that?
I think those small wins are so important in building momentum. And, I think for the first time, we've seen some small innovations finally been accepted in the market. What we supply, in essence, the heart of it is, is cable that goes into power homes, whether that be the lighting or the power or other circuits. And for a long way, the way that the cable has been installed by the contractor has been the same, and the packaging has been the same, and the methodologies have been the same. So we've been able to introduce some solutions that have been able to break through that mold. And whilst they may only have penetrated market share by a relatively small amount, they've actually been embedded, and they're there to stay now. And now the opportunity for us is to look at version 2 and version 3 and make it bigger. So we've seen, on a small scale, a number of innovations work. I think also now our story is starting to resonate, and I think talking not just about the economics, but talking about the environment, talking about engagement, and that's more than just safety. It's about having diverse teams trying to lead the thought methodology. It's starting to resonate with a lot of people that we talk to, whether they be customers or other suppliers into the industry. And I think the feeling is that there is a real willingness to want to accelerate the transformation. So that's exciting, but yeah, we've still got a long way to go.
Yeah, certainly a process. But like you say, it's kind of one brick at a time, and then I'm sure that momentum is going to build. And this is not a trend that's kind of unique to you guys. This is happening across multiple industries.
So absolutely. I look at we've got a quite a unique recyclable spool that we send our basic cable out to sites, to construction sites, and for years and years they were on these small, cheap throwaway plastic spools that were done just like that. At the end of the day, once the cable's been installed, they get put into the bin or those big collection bins on site. And we've brought a recycling spool in. They cost more, but you're able to return them to your local wholesaler where you bought them. You get a small refund, and then that comes back to us and we start to recycle. And we're now seeing that, over 30% of those spools are now actually being recycled, being repositioned, reused, and then going through the cycle again. So for me, that's a milestone win. From everything that was sort of one way to now starting to see genuine circularity is really pleasing.
So wins like that, how do you sort of communicate that into your team? What does that process?
Look, we've got a great marketing team. I have to say that some of them are here, but it's all about communication. What we can do in terms of transparency externally through various platforms, but also internally. We spend a lot of time, whether it be we've got screens all over our facilities, whether they're in offices or they're in factories, just trying to highlight what we do, what our message is, what the success that we're having. And I think that's what about building culture is all about. Sharing the successes. When we don't succeed, what are we doing about it, and keep on promoting it. So yeah, it's very important.
Yeah. And are you seeing that come through into kind of perhaps improving retention within the business or making it easier to bring employees in, things like that?
Look, I think at the moment in the environment, we talk a lot about productivity and absenteeism and retention, and there's a number of issues around the challenges that we face in all businesses. But there's no doubt having a compelling story, one that's linked, and hopefully, we can mirror to people's own values, will help attract employees and help retain them. And that's certainly what we're trying to do. It's trying to connect our vision with our people. And the more that we can have success in doing that, and the more we can share some of these stories, I think the better chance we have of doing it.
Yeah. And there'll be, I'm sure, lots of people listening to this who are running teams, business units, companies who are part of kind of global organizations. What are some of the most important leadership lessons that you've kind of learned from localizing a global vision?
Look, I think it's one of the it's one of the areas of my role that I enjoy. I think you really need to buy into the global vision. That's the business. That's the vision that's being sold all over the world. My role is to implement that locally, and all countries are different. Even between Australia and New Zealand, around my span of responsibility, there's different nuances in either country. But it's just so important to keep the core global fundamental at the heart of your strategy, and then adapt that to be able to suit the local environment. And look, there's a number of ways to execute, but I think we've got a global playbook that gives us some really good structure. It's demonstrated to work in various countries, and it's just having the trust that we can, take the methodology and the principles and adapt that locally. And again, set yourself bold ambitions and big dreams, but in small pieces, break that down and achieve it, and then celebrate that success.
And what would you say, just sort of flipping that a bit, what would you say to perhaps people who are listening to this who are the global CEOs and are looking to kind of implement a strategy into the regions that they oversee? What advice would you give them on how to really get that buy-in at a local level?
One of the things that I would certainly recommend is that you need to be able to spend the time understanding the strategy, understanding the principles, understanding what defines success, and then regularly being able to, if you encounter obstacles, be able to benchmark, have these obstacles been faced in other parts of the world? If so, what was done? We're facing this. Is there a way that we can potentially adapt locally? So I think work collaboratively. I think there's a risk that a lot of countries can go off and they're rogue and they're operating in silo, and that's not what part of being a part of a global business is. And I think it's been able to try to collaborate as effectively as you can across distance and across time.
And let's talk. You mentioned it earlier, the E3 operating model. Just talk us through that again.
Yeah. So the three pillars of E3, which is quite unique. The first one is quite traditional around economic, and we all have our economic KPIs. We all have our customers. I think our view with customers is a little bit unique. It's not every customer is the same, but those customers that want to go deep with us, we've got quite a deep proposition that we can help support their development and growth. So the economic piece, I suppose, is more familiar with people to others. With regards to engagement, there's a few factors to engagement. One of them is safety. Being a manufacturing environment, safety is paramount, and the routines that we have internally to be able to prevent accidents, I suppose our record stands alone. You know, we're well over 1,000 days LTI free. We have minimal LTIs annually, and MTIs, and we've got very good routines in place. But I think also with engagement is making sure our employees are engaged and what those strategies look like, making sure we've got a diverse workforce. And diversity, I think, has proven that it empowers teams and it delivers better outcomes. So those metrics are important. And then environment around, reducing not only our own internal Scope 1, Scope 2 and Scope 3 emissions, but also playing an active role in the environment with regards to the materials we use, trying to reduce, waste going to landfill and having, genuine actions. There's a lot of greenwashing that I think happens in the environmental space, but having genuine actions that can be audited, that can be demonstrated to work. You get all of those three pillars right. And in terms of my own personal measurements, I can't achieve the KPIs in economic, but not in environment or engagement, and have done a good job. I need to be successful in all three to be able to deliver on what's required of me in my role.
And do you see the three as all feeding each other, or are they very separate?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you have to have the three to get the genuine success that you want. We've got a model where we partner with a lot of customers, predominantly distributors and wholesalers, and be able to work with them on environmental strategies that can have a genuine impact on the environment. To be able to work collaboratively with them on what's best in class with regards to material handling and safety, how we can work on training and education to make them stronger businesses with stronger value in their markets. I think it all is interwoven for sure.
You talked about like ethical sourcing, for example, like making sure you're using materials that are recyclable or better for the environment. If those are going to cost you more and obviously impact on that economic pillar, how do you go about making those decisions and choosing the areas that you're really going to focus on?
Yeah, look, in terms of the ethical decisions, I think that's a no-brainer. We'll go down the ethical sourcing path 100% of the time. And if it's a higher cost than what others are able to provide by non-ethical sources, well then, we need to find other ways to be able to compete at that level. We want to offer the market low carbon products, and in our business, which is cable, it's either aluminium or copper conductors. Our offer into the aluminium space is 100% low carbon, and we source low carbon material that goes into our cable. It costs us more, but we're strong about that being a value proposition that we want to deliver to market. So we need to find savings in other areas. We buy all of our copper from BHP locally in Australia. At the moment, we don't have a low carbon source, and we're working with them, and we'd like to accelerate that development. But if it means there's a higher cost, there's a higher cost in materials, and we need to find some efficiencies in some other areas. And I think that's the challenge that our strategy does present. And we look at new innovation or new strategies, and we look at it across two lenses. Is there a willingness to use, and is there a willingness to pay? And we're finding, and I think this is what gives us the confidence, we're finding that there is a willingness to use. There's a willingness to try new innovation if it's going to save time and money. There's a willingness to use low carbon materials if we can, try to reduce the amount of waste going to landfill. The challenge that we've got is that where is the willingness to pay? And I think that's a big question. How much value can we create? And then what support can others help provide? But, that's the dilemma that we're facing.
Yeah, such a tough balance to find. Does that feed into something you mentioned before about not trying to be everything to everyone?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for us, it's all about selectivity. We know Australia's not a huge market, but for its size, there is a lot of opportunity. But a lot of that opportunity may not have any real interest in wanting to be operating in a way that's, going to have a positive impact on the environment. They may not necessarily have the same standards around safety and around people that what we do. And from an economic or return on shareholder perspective, they may not want the same sort of return. So that business, those markets, those verticals, then they're not for us. But trying to find the verticals where we can add genuine value and we can achieve all that we want across the E3 is just really important. And that's why, if you're in the office, you could see the map of electrification, and we're very specific about where we think that we can add genuine value. And, it comes to, the large-scale wind, large-scale solar, the transmission, high fire safety buildings, residential construction, infrastructure, data centers. And we know that those markets have got genuine needs for the types of services and solutions that we're developing. So, selectivity is the key for us.
I mean, given everything you're talking about there, it's quite an interesting conversation because you're thinking about what does the future kind of Australian and New Zealand, what do those economies look like? What are you most excited about Australia going forward?
That's a big question. I mean, we're doing a lot of work at the moment on our strategic plan out to 2028 into 2029, and you can, from an electrification lens, you can see that there's a huge need to be able to accelerate the amount of green energy that we can produce. So we see that the need to accelerate, whether it be onshore wind or solar or offshore wind, whatever that might be, there's a genuine need to accelerate that. So trying to create innovative solutions that will help in that acceleration is very exciting. The amount of data centers now that are needed to be able to house the amount of data that's being used, especially with AI, it's doubling and it's tripling, quarter on quarter. So being able to understand what impact that has on the electrification network and try to look for solutions is just so important. We're starting to see, immigration numbers come back, and the amount of housing that's needed to be able to house a growing population. There's challenges there, and I don't think it gets talked about a lot. But there's new ways to manufacture, and I think I'm quite passionate about modern methods of construction and starting to look at new solutions such as off-site modular building. Helping to support the traditional building, just to be able to make sure that we can keep the types of construction and housing numbers up to what levels we need is exciting. So I just hope that there's enough industry that's willing to embrace new technology, new thinking, new innovation to help us deliver on what the potential is.
Yeah, we had the CEO of one of the biggest modular construction companies in the US on the podcast not so long ago, and that was fascinating to hear how they were approaching.
Yeah, it's a phenomenal. Look, modern methods of construction, I think, is a phenomenon, but it's just about how it gets a start. And I was recently at a launch in New South Wales last week for a New South Wales Homes project, where they want to build 8,000 homes under this modular offsite construction. And the amount of organisations that have already invested in early stages of the supply chain it's great. I just think we really need some structure now in the industry to be able to support intent being more broadly rolled out. But it's a huge opportunity for construction going forward.
What would that mean for you guys? That would make your delivery a lot easier, I would presume.
Look, we've got some solutions in terms of modular wiring, but even you still need wiring within homes. If we take a view on residential and multi-residential homes, you need wiring to be able to power the power points and the lights and other things. And I think it's just the way it's more efficient. At the moment, it's quite traditional, and we're using traditional means. Weather plays a huge role in the construction industry, but to be able to build these homes in enclosed environments where there is no impact to weather, where you can take a lot of the risk or the project delay risk out, it can be a lot more pre-planned. And I think there's so much more efficiency opportunity, and we'll talk about the problems with regards to productivity. I think there's an answer right there.
It's interesting when you say you're working on your strategic plan for 2028, 29. It feels kind of ridiculous to even plan for 2026 the way things move at the moment. But
it does. I think you say it every year. The pace of change is so fast, it just continues to accelerate. But you have to have a plan. You have to have an end game. Investment takes time, and you need to be very clear on what that investment needs to look like. A lot of these strategies, they don't happen overnight. So you need to have a plan, but you need to have the ability to be agile as well, because no doubt we'll face other factors that are going to change what we think the outlook tomorrow is today.
As we just move on to the final part of the podcast here, we have a bit of a tradition. So we like to ask each guest the same 2 questions, to see what comes out of that. So the first one is, what's one thing you've changed your mind about recently, and why?
Recently, there's been a lot of discussion around flexible working arrangements. I think during COVID, especially being where I am in Melbourne, we were locked down for a significant period of time, which forced big parts of the organisation to have to work remotely from home. Post-COVID, I think people got used to that and the flexibility that gave. I've been a big believer that, to be able to effectively collaborate, to improve productivity, that teams needed to be together in an environment where they can work together and share. And I've been a big one that has been pushing to bring the organisation back to working 5 days in the office. Just recently, I suppose, from listening to our employees and listening to our HR organisation, effective productivity or effective outcomes come from engaged employees more so than anything else. So if we can come up with an environment that does have some flexibility, certainly not working remotely more than in the office, but giving people flexibility, but giving them the support, I think we'll get better outcomes. So that's probably one of the bigger changes that I've had personally in the recent times.
Yeah, interesting.
My marketing manager's laughing at me through the window. I'm not sure she's totally on board.
Yeah, I imagine the HR team's very, very proud of themselves for
that's right,
getting that over the line. What's one thing you've not changed your mind about? It's a belief that you hold kind of central to you and one you'd want to share.
Yeah, so the biggest thing that I still believe in is and I think I've learnt a little bit about this during the last few years, where we've started to bring innovations from concept through to execution and commercialization. And in a manufacturing environment, to be successful, you need to be efficient. We're up against some fairly robust, low-cost competition. So a lot of the traditional manufacturing metrics around, equipment OE, machine equipment OEE, scrap, line speeds, downtime, absenteeism, manufacturing variances, they're fundamental to having a good operation. When you introduce innovation and it disrupts systems and processes, and you can accept that for a period of time because it's something new coming through. But to be able to sustain then the new innovation in a manufacturing environment, you need to get back to what the fundamentals are of having, focus on make sure that, your procurement and your purchasing of raw materials or components is low, that our plant is operating efficiently, that we're a lean operation, that we've got less downtime. So whilst innovation, it's important to have some flexibility during the design and the conception stage. To be able to embed that and to sustain it, you need to get back to what have been traditionally, some of the fundamentals of manufacturing. And, I think that will never change.
At what point in that process, if you've implemented a change and perhaps you've still got people in the organization saying, we need more time, this is not quite working yet, how do you kind of push back on that in terms of, no, this needs to happen?
So that's a learning now. I mean, I've had some ideas that have been personal to myself that I feel are good, and I have probably held on to those whilst they've been suboptimal a little bit longer than what if I was a little bit removed from that idea, would have done so. I think having strong process and structure in stage gate and having a very clear project plan to say, this is the date that we need to have achieved a certain, whatever that metric might be, and we have regular reviews, strong project management. without that process to oversee anything, these things just don't work. Allowing people to have emotion drive decisions, or or not having alignment or having strict routines, that's where things fall down.
Yeah. Are there particular red flags you look for, especially when it comes to emotion being involved in sort of those decisions and ideas? Is there a way you can pick up on that quite quickly?
Not red flags around emotions, but you need to use the data. Ultimately, the data will tell you if what you're saying is going to work. I mean, any project requires an upfront plan, and assumptions have to be made. And at some point in time, you need to be delivering against those assumptions. So I think ensuring that you've got strong data, you're able to use that data to assess whether something is on track or isn't off track. And if it's not, making some change is important.
Yeah. And if you can't measure it, it shouldn't be a kind of fundamental part of the project.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Greg, thank you so much for today. It's been a real pleasure to speak to you.
Thank you. Been quite enjoyable. It's amazing how quickly it goes when you're talking about something that you're quite passionate about. So yeah, thanks very much. It's been a good discussion.